Story 1. Note 1. This story was told to me by a friend and is about her father. I won't be able to answer many follow-up questions. It takes place around 2005. I believe the story to be true, but can't verify it, of course. Note 2. This happens in Sweden, where there's no at-will employment. Once an employee is past the initial 6-month probation period, you can't fire them without a cause, which also requires an established paper trail. Note 3. I am not a native English speaker, and professional terms may be wrong. I'm happy to take any corrections. My friend's father, who has since retired, was a mechanical engineer. He was around 55 when this happened and very experienced in his field. In fact, he had some skill sets that were close to unique to the extent that you might be able to replicate them. But at extreme costs, multiple people from multiple companies from multiple countries would take weeks, if not months, to get up to speed with specific projects to do the same things. He was also a no-nonsense kind of guy who did his job well, but also pointed out problems and expected others to point out problems to him. He was extremely solution-oriented and had no time for office politics or keeping a positive attitude at work. Basically, he was your everyday grumpy older engineer who really knew his stuff and was always ready to help if you asked, but not very forthcoming in team-building exercises and so on. He also ran his own business on the side, doing minor projects and so on. As was required by his employer, he had reported this and ensured it did not cause any conflicts of interest, so his employer knew and accepted this. He was considered a valuable employee and received several awards that he cared little for. But anyway, during his many years with this employer, by all accounts, they paid him well, respected his knowledge, and accommodated his style. He returned the favor by working very hard and mentoring younger and newly employed engineers to make them effective co-workers. Then his firm was acquired by a larger firm, and a new management team was installed. Initially, everyone was promised that things would remain the same, but with the new management came a new office culture. The new management pressured for unpaid overtime, for a more American corporate culture with cheering and clapping and so on. He considered it extremely cringe-worthy and refused to participate. His status as a long-standing and knowledgeable employee kept him safe for some time before the new management realized that resistance to the new culture centered around him and started pressuring him to play along. When he did not, they turned increasingly hostile, realizing that he held a lot of soft power in the company, having mentored a large percentage of the engineers and resistance to their leadership centering around him. They started ordering him to work overtime. He replied that he was on time with his projects and that if they had identified an emergency requiring overtime, they would have to bring it up with the union to negotiate the overtime and make sure it was an actual emergency. The contract with the union said no overtime unless in an emergency. They tried to force him to participate in the cheering and clapping by making it mandatory for him to attend and yelling at him to participate. He did, but so unenthusiastically that the event turned even more cringe-worthy and people started laughing. The workday turned more and more hostile, and he knew that things would come to a head sooner or later. Being an experienced engineer and knowing how to document things, he already had his ducks in a row. Then it finally happened. They caught him answering an email for his side business on his work laptop, brought him in, and fired him on the spot for theft of company resources. He sat at the conference table, looked the 3 managers in their eyes, one after the other, and asked, "Are you sure you want to do this?" They all said yes. "Are you really sure you want to do this?" He was escorted to his desk by security to leave his phone, badge, and computer at the desk, and then escorted out. Once out of the building, he phoned his union representative, who immediately canceled the firing, claiming there was no just cause, which meant that it would go to the labor board for arbitration. The company had an IT policy that it was okay to use the company laptop for personal business, including a side business, as long as you were on a break and compliant with IT security protocols. The company was aware of and had approved his side business. He was on a break. Of course, he had his declaration of a side business signed by his former manager and the IT policy available and sent both to the union representative. Then he called his lawyer and asked him to send the pre-prepared cease and desist on 2 patents he held. The patents were not that significant and nothing he could make any serious money out of since they were mostly for very specific things used by the solutions he designed and used at his employers. But they were still his, and he had brought them with him into the employment and allowed the employer to use them in exchange for slightly higher pay, all duly documented in his contract, of course. Then he went home for some vacation and tended to his side business. He was always a man to prepare and had enough money saved up to last him for a good time, to the extent that he considered retiring entirely. My friend said he had 2 job offers from competitors who had looked to be sniping him for some time within the week, basically as soon as they learned he was available. He was gracious but declined, offering them to consult with his side business, now that he had the time, which they eagerly accepted at twice the hourly rate he had made at his earlier employers. His colleagues started ringing the day after for advice, since the projects he had managed could not go on without him. He was perfectly polite but denied any information and help, saying he had left everything he had with management and to contact them, as he was no longer employed there. Several clients that phoned his private number were told the same thing. Since his private number was not on a public registry, he suspected that both colleagues and clients spent some time and/or money to find it. It took 2 weeks before a manager phoned him and asked things. He politely declined to answer, got yelled at, and replied with something like, "I am sorry, you must have mistaken me for someone who works for you," and hung up. This happened a few times, and the next week HR phoned him and stated the firing had been a mistake, and he was welcome back to his job. He again politely declined, saying that he awaited the labor board's decision, but until then he was happy to consult for them at 6 times his hourly pay after taxes and administrative costs, of course. After a few days of wrangling and trying to negotiate, they had to accept. Then he sprung the patent issue on them, forcing them to pay for those 2. Less than 2.5 weeks after being fired, he was back at his desk. After roughly 3 months, the firing came to the labor board. The employers stated that they believed they had handled the issue correctly, but were still willing to offer my friend's father his position back in the interest of goodwill and reconciliation. My friend's father and the union simply stated that he was now employed elsewhere, his own company, and no longer available. The labor board ruled in my friend's father's and the union's favor, and he got the normal damages, 3 months pay damages and 24 months pay severance package, including pension and, of course, the lawyer costs of the union paid by the employer. According to my friend, her father continued to work there until he retired, working 20 hours or so per week and 10-15 hours for other companies, making a pretty penny, continuing to charge them 3 times what he charged their competitors as an jerk tax. The managers were not fired, but they were moved into their own group apart from the rest of the department when it came to bonus calculations, and the costs of her father's consultancy fees and the costs of the labor board arbitration were budgeted there, meaning they were constantly over budget and thus ineligible for bonuses for several years, which was a decent percentage of the incentives at that company, making at least one of them quit. My friend also said her father usually met any management complaints with a big grin and, "What are you going to do? Fire me after that?" Story 2. This took place more than a decade ago. I started working for a small branch of a company and got along really well with my boss, the branch manager. I used to compare him to Michael Scott, though not to his face. In this scenario, I would have been Jim Halpert. After working there for a while, my boss was approached with a fantastic offer to manage a bigger branch a few hours away. This was because the owner wanted to place his son as the branch manager of a small location and needed to vacate a position to do so. My boss graciously turned down the offer because his kids had just started at their new schools, and he didn't want to uproot them again. He had relocated to take the current position. This was not taken well by our corporate office, but they couldn't fire him directly for it. A few weeks later, I saw our office manager, a lady nobody in the office liked, in my boss's office filing paperwork, or so it seemed, which was odd but not alarming. The next week, my boss was going to be on vacation, and all the office staff had to attend a meeting for non-salaried employees at the corporate headquarters. While we were at the corporate event, our office manager handed out new office keys to all of us 3 who were there. My boss was on vacation and salaried. I asked, "Why are we getting new keys?" She said it was because someone lost theirs. None of us had lost our keys. We were all sitting together and could easily confirm this. I texted my boss to ask him, and he had no idea what she was up to. I got a bad feeling about what was happening. I called him after the meeting and told him to come by my house Sunday when he got back from out of town. I explained that I was 95% certain they were planning to fire him on Monday. I didn't know the reason, I just had a gut feeling. I said it was too bad because if he was fired, I wouldn't want to work there anymore, knowing that they would do such shady things. He jokingly said he should fire me first so I could go on unemployment. I laughed and told him that he should write me a termination notice. If he didn't get fired on Monday, it would be just between us. But if he did get fired, I could take it to the unemployment office and have proof that I was fired for something that would make me eligible for benefits. So we did, and he was fired on Monday for misfiling paperwork of some sort. I definitely did not go back to work. They tried calling me in, and I told them that my boss had already fired me. I took the proof with me to the unemployment office and was good to go until the former employer disputed my claim. I had a hearing on the phone with the unemployment office and my corporate human resources person. Human resources, he wasn't fired. The paperwork he submitted with his claim isn't the right paperwork. It should have come from human resources, not his manager. Unemployment office, why did the manager not do that then? Where is he? Human resources, he no longer works for the company. Unemployment office, why did he leave? Human resources, he was fired. Unemployment office, why was he fired? Getting exasperated. Human resources, mumbles for doing paperwork incorrectly. Unemployment office, well, that is hardly the fault of the terminated employee. How is he to know that the paperwork is invalid if it is coming from their supervisor? They told my human resources that they could rehire me or not, but my claim was valid. They couldn't rehire me because they'd already filled the position. So I gotta collect unemployment for a while before moving on to my next job. My former boss is doing well now, it seems, and I don't feel bad at all. For the record, it is very likely that they would have invented a way of firing me after they got rid of my boss. Had they done that, they would have made certain that my termination was such that I wouldn't be eligible for unemployment. I took that power away from them by getting fired preemptively. I am also positive that when I saw the office manager in his office while he was away, she was arranging the setup for him to be fired. Story 3. My dad, let's name him Mark, works at Disney Studios at the Mickey Minnie Runaway Railway. He was escorting a Make-A-Wish child and their family when an entitled mother and her child came into the scene. Entitled mother, hey, can you let us through like you did for that family? Mark, sorry, I can't just let you skip the entire line. Entitled mother, but why not? Mark, because they have a fast pass. My dad was lying because he didn't want to get into a big argument. Entitled mother, I have one too. Entitled mother was lying as well. Mark, well, if you have one, why are you in the standard line? At this time, her child was in great discomfort. His face was bright red, and he kept on telling the entitled mother to move on and forget about it. Let's go. Entitled mother, no, I'm not moving on. I want to go the same way they did. Mark, okay, show me your fast pass. Entitled mother, why do I have to show you? At this point, everyone in the line was looking at the entitled mother. Mark, because I have to make sure you're not lying just to get in front of the line. Entitled mother, I'm not going to show you. Where is your manager? She said it. Mark, I am the manager. My dad was lying. He just wanted to get her to be quiet and prove her wrong and embarrass her. Entitled mother, what? How can you be the manager? I saw you taking that family down the fast pass line. Managers don't do that. Mark, because no one else was available and I wanted to be nice. Entitled mother, just let us through. At this point, the entitled mother's child just left the line altogether. The child was about 17 years old and just straight up left. Then, the real manager came into play and politely asked her to leave, or else she would be banned. Entitled mother, but he was assaulting me, and I asked my son to go get a police officer. Manager, really? Then why did he come get me and tell me that you assaulted my employee? Entitled mother, what? Child, You've gotten away way too many times, Mom. How many people have you gotten arrested and thrown into jail by lying? The entitled mother was speechless, just staring at her son, who had just disobeyed her and got her in trouble. This was the time the police came in. Apparently, the entitled mother's child didn't totally disobey her. My dad, the manager, and the entitled mother's child all had the same smug face as she was taken away by the police to be questioned.